Okay, well, welcome everybody. Good evening. This is the sixth session of Mishnah in Depth, Masechet Ketubot. Tonight we have a special guest teacher, Rabbi David Silver. This course is a project of Drisha's Rivka Rosenwein's Zichron Livracha's Mishnah division and is sponsored in memory of Rivka Rosenwein. As you come into the Zoom room, I will invite you to become a panelist. You should accept that invitation. It just means that you can choose to put on your camera so we can see your lovely smiling faces if you wish. And when Rabbi Silver pauses for comments and questions, you'll be able to unmute and ask them yourself. We just ask that you keep yourself on mute when you're not speaking. It minimizes the background noise so we can all hear each other. Your questions and comments are always welcome in the chat, or if you're joining us on Facebook Live, in the Facebook comments, and I will bring them to Rabbi Silver. And with that, I will pass it over to Rabbi Silver.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm just substituting this 1 week for Rabbanit Leah, and I understand you're studying mishnayot in Masechet Ketubot. So we'll take a look this evening at several mishnayot in Masechet Ketubot. Let me just say at the outset that Masechet Ketubot, as the name suggests, the Ketuva is a document which essentially describes the obligations, financial obligations, and some other obligations as well, that fall upon both the groom and the bride, the man and the woman. Most of it is, of course, obligations of the man towards the woman, but the way the Ketuv is set up, as the Mishnah explained earlier in the tractate, they're somewhat reciprocal. As the way the Mishnah sets it up, it's husband's responsible for X, and on the other side of it, the husband has certain privileges in return for his obligation. The various obligations, including if she's taken hostage, he's obligated to try to redeem her. He has to bury her, etc. There's all kinds of obligations, and then there are privileges. So the tractate is, a lot of it is about the financial side. In other words, it's not a tractate generally. If you're looking for romance, Masechet Ketubot is not the place to go. There is a financial side to this arrangement, to this marriage. That's what the mishnayot are largely focused on, not exclusively, but largely focused on. So, for example, if we take a look at the Mishnah, the first Mishnah in the 8th chapter, I was told by Leah told me to pick some mishnayot from the 8th and 9th chapters, which I will do. But let's look at the very first Mishnah in chapter 8, which is Ha'isha shenaflua nechasim ad shelo titares. So the case over here is a woman who inherits, let's say, naflua nechasim, let's say she inherited property before she was mitares. Now, mitares in the Gemara, the Mishnah, is another word for mitkadesh. There is kedushin. As we know, there are two stages to the marriage. In the first step, there is what's called kedushin, and that creates the couple is then married, but they're not actually living together. That's called erusin or kedushin. And under those circumstances, they're fully married. She's considered a married woman, and all that entails. But the full privileges that he has, financial rights in her property, don't fully exist yet. The Mishnah talks about a situation where the woman, let's say, got either a gift or some kind of inheritance before kedushin. So then, if that's the case, so she comes into the marriage when she's mitkadeshet, she has her own money. She had an inheritance. So what happens with that money? So modin beit Shammai ubeit Hillel shemocheret v'notenet v'kayam. So both Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel agree that the money that she has, she brings into the marriage. The money came to her prior to the kedushin. They both agree that the woman is permitted to give it away or to sell it, v'kayam, and that gift or that sale is valid. We'll come back to this in a minute. Let's just read the Mishnah. Naflulan kishanit arsa. What about a case where there's kedushin? There is kedushin. There's not yet nisuin, which is when the stage of living together. But then she's a married woman, and then she got, maybe her father died. She got some kind of inheritance or whatever, or a gift. So then we have a dispute of Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. Beit Shammai omrim timkor. Beit Shammai says, since she received this money before they're actually living together, before Nisuin, Beit Shammai says she can sell this property. I'll explain more in a minute. She's permitted to sell it. It's hers to sell. You can always sell something you own. So it's hers to sell. Beit Hillel omrim, Beit Hillel says, lo timkor. She is not to sell it. Elu va'elu modim. But they both agree, she'im machra v'natna kayam. They both agree that if she did sell it, the sale is valid. Fine. So in other words, we have the two cases with the question is, did she receive this money before there was kedushin, erusin? In which case, she has the right to sell it. But if she received the money after kedushin, Beit Shammai says she can still sell it because there's no nisuin yet. But Beit Hillel has an interesting position. She is not to sell it. But if she did sell it, the sale is valid. Fine. I'll just read a little more. We'll come back to Beit Hillel's position. I just wanted to point something out of Beit Hillel. The Mishnah continues, Rabbi Yehuda, Amru Lifnei Rabban Gamliel. Rabbi Yehuda reports, they said to Rabban Gamliel, Homu v'zacha ba'isha, lo yizkeh b'nechasim. They asked the question, if the man zacha ba'isha, he's married to the woman, they're married. After kedushin, they're married. So why shouldn't he also, if he marries the woman, why shouldn't the man take possession or have rights in her property? Omar lahen, to which he Rabbi Gamliel said, Ala chadoshim onu boshin, elishatem megalguin aleinu et hayeshanim. In other words, Rabbi Gamliel said to them, I don't know, as far as I'm concerned, Rabbi Gamliel said, even in the case where there wasn't only kedushin, but there was nisuin, they're fully married, they're living together. In which case, the Mishnah is clear that she may not sell. She's not allowed to sell the property. If she did sell the property, as the Mishnah continues, naflula misha niseit. If the property came to her after there was nisuin, elu ve'elu modim shim machrav, then Beit Shammai and everybody agrees. Shabal motzi miyad halokochot, that the husband, if she made a sale, the husband can go to the person that bought the property or got the gift and take it away. So, but Rabbi Gamliel says that halacha, that after the suin, she has no right to sell it, and if she did sell it, the sale is invalid. He seems to that's the accepted position, but that he questions. He says even there, I think she should have the right to sell it. Okay, she doesn't after the suin. That's bad enough. Now you want to extend it even where the property came to her before the suin after Emerson? I don't accept that. That's basically what the Mishnah is talking about. Now, I just want to just briefly say something about this, two things about the Mishnah. First of all, what the Mishnah is referring to, the property we're talking about, is known in the Gemara as Nechsei Melog. Nechsei Melog means the following. There are two kinds of, when the couple gets married, the woman, if she has property, the property can be seen in two different ways. The two different kinds of setups for this property. One is that remember, when they get married, it's a financial arrangement, not just a religious or a relationship which affects their personal relationship. But there's also financial arrangements. So typically, the man has an obligation. The man's obligation, detailed earlier in this tractate, The main obligation is called the ketubah. So that's either 200 zuz or 100 zuz, depending if she were married or not married. That's a whole other discussion. That's called the ikar ketubah. That's the basic ketubah. Then in the 5th chapter of this tractate, the man can add more money in. Let's say she's entitled to 200 zuz, but the man can say, okay, I'll give you 1,000 zuz. It could be any number. It can't be less than 200. It can exceed 200. That's called tosefet ketubah. But in addition to that, they can bring other things into the marriage. So the woman, let's say she has property, so she can bring what's called a dowry or nedunya into the marriage, and that's actually part of the ketubah arrangement. And it can be in one of two ways. One way is that the woman says, "I'm bringing in X amount. Here's a piece of property, $1,000 piece of property," and the man, she gives it to the husband. In the event of, let's say, divorce, the marriage is ended, then the man has an obligation to return the $1,000. That is called nichseit son barzel. That's nichseit son barzel, iron sewn. It means that the money essentially is his to use, and by that we mean, let's say the property goes up in value. She brings in $1,000 piece of property as part of the dowry, and the real estate market went up, and now they get divorced 20 years later, and the property is worth $10,000. He returns to the wife or ex-wife in this case $1,000, and he keeps the profit. On the other hand, if the real estate market fell, it's only worth $200. He still has to give $1,000. That's nichseit son barzel. That's not what our Mishnah is talking about.
Excuse me, he doesn't return the land? He returns just the cash amount?
No, he doesn't have the cash value. If the land is worth more, he keeps it. It's his, but it's basically his, and he has an obligation upon marriage of whatever they evaluate the property. It doesn't have to be property, by the way. It can be anything she brings into the marriage. Whatever it is, that's evaluated. But the case, our Mishnah is talking about a different case called nichsei melog. Nichsei melog is different. And nichsei melog means she brings property into the marriage. The property is hers. It's her property. The husband has the right to use the property. The term that's in the Gemara is he has what's called the kinyan peirot. He has rights in the profit that this property produces. So you have a piece of land, let's say, and there's trees on the land, or olive groves, or whatever it is, wheat. It doesn't matter. The stuff the land grows, it's called kinyan peirot, and that belongs to him. She, though, owns the property. So again, if upon death, divorce, or whatever, let's say divorce, leave death out of it for now, then she gets the property back, whatever it's worth. If the loss is her loss, the gain is her gain. So you have a situation, which is in the case of, let's say, the nichsei melog, you could have analogous situations, not without marriage. You could have two people who arrange between themselves that one owns the actual object, and the other owns or has rights in that which the object produces. Now, the point is that nichsei melog is similar. In other words, there's the one is called kinyan haguf and kinyan peirot. The Gemara elsewhere in Masechet Gittin is a long sugya which tries to figure out if the person who actually owns the property is the owner of the property, the person that owns the property itself. What about the other person who doesn't own the property but has rights of use? Does that give you also a status of an owner or not? That's a great dispute between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. What's interesting, though, without getting into the details of it, that even though this arrangement of husband and wife seems identical to that, kinyan peirot, does kinyan peirot give you the right? In other words, the point in this case is that everybody seems to agree There's no dispute that when they're fully married, the woman has no right to sell it. That is to say, if she sold the property to somebody who buys the property, the husband has the right to say that the sale is invalid because the produce belongs to me. So therefore, she had no right to sell. That's what this Mishnah is about. Now, the point is, what is very striking in the Mishnah is the following, is the position of Beit Hillel, which is a very strange position. In the intermediate case, there is Kedushin, they're not living together. And she has this property that falls to her, an inheritance, a gift, or whatever. Beit Shammai says, okay, since they're not fully married, she's permitted to sell it because it's her property. They'll be married later, but right now they're married Erusin without Nesuin. But Beit Hillel's position is very strange. Beit Hillel says she's not allowed to sell it. But if she does sell it, the sale is valid. I just wanted to point out that that actually is a very, very strange position to take. And it probably does say something about this particular arrangement. Because normally, when you say you shouldn't do X, but if you did X, then it's valid, okay? That idea of not being allowed to do something. But the evidence, if you did it, you did it. We find that principle often when it comes to Isser v'Heter. You shouldn't do this. You should do a mitzvah a certain way. If you didn't do the mitzvah the perfect way, you're still yotzei the mitzvah. That we have in many, many cases. That's very common. Don't do X, but if you did it, it's valid. But we never find this. I can't think of any other case where we find this principle when it comes to monetary matters. We never see that. Either the money belongs to Ruvain or it belongs to Shimon. We don't find cases when it comes to Choshen Mishpat where you shouldn't do something, but if you did it, then it takes effect. Here we have an exceptional case. On the surface, it's simply a financial matter. So what do you mean she shouldn't do it, but if she did it, it's valid? Either it's hers or it's not hers when it comes to monetary matters. Is it hers? She can sell it. If it's not hers, the sale's invalid. But Beit Hillel has this intermediate position. She shouldn't sell it, but if she does sell it, it's valid. So this speaks to, I think what lies behind the Mishnah is an understanding that this case of Nichsei Malo, which is the fundamental, that's the basic, that's the default position of property the woman brings into the marriage. What the Mishnah seems to be suggesting, certainly it lends itself to a deeper investigation, is that we can't look at this only as purely monetary. That actually Nichsei Malo doesn't fit necessarily into the normal status of Kinyan Perot and Kinyan Aguf, but it's part and parcel of this relationship. And therefore, since it's part of a relationship, not purely monetary, it takes a monetary form. And because it's part of this relationship, we can have this principle of don't do X, but if you did it, it takes effect, which you don't typically find in any monetary situation. You find it when it comes to mitzvot, so that those kinds of obligations. That's what I wanted to simply point out about this Mishnah. And I think the deeper point is that I think that the mishnayot in Masechet Ketubot, which deal with monetary obligations for the most part, we'll see this in a moment in chapter 9, but I think the Mishnah is aware, it's subtle, but the Mishnah is aware that we can't look at these things only as purely monetary situations. We have to, when you study the Gemara about this, etc., I think this is one of the basic themes of the tractate. It's very important that we understand that there's a financial side to marriage, not just personal relationship. But on the other hand, it's never just purely financial. These two very different things are actually interwoven in certain ways. I'll give you another example where I think this is actually the case, where the Mishnah is already suggesting such a thing, and that is the next chapter, chapter 9. If you look at chapter 9, so that's Perek Tet, the first Mishnah. The first Mishnah of chapter 9. This is this ninth chapter of Ketubot, by the way, in terms of the Gemara in the 9th chapter, is one of the richest chapters in the whole Talmud. There's all kinds of amazingly interesting things, because what the chapter really is about claims and counterclaims, and we'll come to that. It's really about claims and counterclaims. It talks about marriage, but some of these principles apply across the board. But the first Mishnah says the following: Hakotev leishto. So a man wrote to his wife, Din udvarim ein li b'nechasayich. The man said to his wife, Din udvarim ein li b'nechasayich. I have no legal privileges or involvement with your property. So he's relinquishing his rights. If he wrote such a thing, Hareza ochel peirot b'chayeha. He's still permitted to eat peirot, means he's the produce of what he hasn't relinquished the rights. Not even if he wrote this. Din udvarim eli b'nechasayich. I have no privileges, no rights in your property, says the Mishnah. It doesn't mean that he has relinquished his rights to the produce. The Meta, and if she dies, Yarsha, he inherits his wife. A man inherits his wife. That's a Mishnah previous. That's not our issue. So Im Kain, the Mishnah asks, if he said I have no right to your property, and he still can eat the produce, so what does it mean to say that he has no right in the property? He's eating the produce, so he has rights. Says the Mishnah, Shim machara unitana kayam. So what he relinquished was not the right to eat the produce. He relinquished his rights to block a sale. The Mishnah we just saw in chapter 8 talks about her right to sell. That's chapter 8, Mishnah 1. And chapter 9, Mishnah 1 says, but what if he relinquishes rights? So one of the rights is the right to sell. So if he can block her sale. Point to Beit Hillel, and after marriage, everybody agrees he can block the sale after Nisuin. But if he stipulates, I forego that right, says the Mishnah, he may forego the right. Now the Mishnah continues. Katavla din udvarim einli b'nechasayich u'v'peirot tehen. If he wrote explicitly, I have no rights to your property nor to the produce, then if he wrote that, he committed himself. He forgoes his right. In that case, he forgoes both the right to get the produce, and he also forgoes the right to block a sale. That's fine. Then Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Li'olam ochel." No, Rabbi Yehuda says, "Li'olam ochel peirei peirot." Actually, yichtav lo dinu dvarim eli b'nefasayach uvepeirot tehen uvepeirot tehen. Rabbi Yehuda brings in another issue over here. That is not the produce, but what about the produce of the produce? In other words, even though he gives up his right, he waives his right to get benefit from the produce, right? So it becomes hers. The payroll becomes hers. But what about if this produce produces other profits? So Rabbi Yehuda says even if you gave up the profits, the produce, okay, so the produce becomes hers. So the produce becomes like the land, right? In other words, the land produces fruit. Let's say the land is hers, the fruit is his. If he forgoes the rights to the fruit, then the fruit is hers. So the fruit is what's called the keren. The fruit is like the capital. But the fruit may produce. It doesn't have to be fruit. It can be anything. That produce may produce other produce. Rabbi Yehuda says that he hasn't given up. The produce becomes like the capital, but that capital also produces something. So that he hasn't given up. Yes, if he wants to give that up, he has to stipulate. Okay, this is the Mishnah. Now, what I wanted to point out about the Mishnah, and then I'll stop and take comments and any questions. It's a very interesting Mishnah. The Mishnah spends a lot of time over here, long Mishnah. What about if the husband gives up his rights? And you ask yourself the question, which I do, why does the Mishnah spend so much time about the husband who gives up his rights? We know what the rights are, right? Why am I giving up the rights? It's a long Mishnah over here, right? Long Mishnah. First Mishnah is a long Mishnah. It's all about foregoing rights. And once again, what I'm thinking is that the Mishnah is making it clear that, yes, of course, the marriage has all kinds of financial and other obligations incumbent on both sides. On the other hand, I think what the Mishnah is actually saying is that we understand that it's a financial arrangement, but it's also a personal arrangement. And sometimes the financial arrangement, you focus too much on the financial side of it. It's not just, marriage is not just a business arrangement. That's what the Mishnah, I think, is getting at. And therefore, yes, this is the law. These are the rules. But we're going to start off in chapter 9 with a long Mishnah about what about if the husband wants to forgo it? So I know I'm entitled to the produce, but you can't sell, but I'm willing to waive that. I'm even willing to waive my right to the produce. Maybe even willing to waive the right to the produce of the produce, etc. So there's the fact that the Mishnah is focused initially on the waiving of rights, to me suggests that this issue is of concern to the Mishnah. When you read Ketubot, all kinds of financial obligations, she says this, he says that, she has this claim, he has a counterclaim. The Mishnah is well aware of that it creates a certain tension, or can create a certain tension within the relationship, and therefore the Mishnah seems to be suggesting perhaps the foregoing of this on many occasions might be the right path to take. Now, that's what I wanted to say about this first Mishnah. Let me just stop here for a second before we continue with chapter 9. If anybody has any questions or comments. If not, we'll just proceed further.
Feel free to unmute yourself or write them in the chat and I will read them out.
I just have one question, really, or it's a comment. He can't give up, let's say he can't give up his right to the payroll, he's not supposed to, but if in actuality he just doesn't take those payrolls, he can just ignore it.
Yes, he can, that's right. He doesn't have to take them, of course not. He doesn't have to take it. These are he has the privilege of taking it. The case in the Mishnah is where he legally forgoes them. He never has to take them. But the point is that in the first Mishnah is if he makes such a stipulation, then he actually can take them. They don't belong to him anymore. They belong to her.
Right, but if he doesn't, let's say, whether he stipulates or not, if he just doesn't take them, who do they actually belong to, or are they hefker?
That's a good question. I mean, if he doesn't take them, I guess if he doesn't take them, doesn't take them means what he said. If he simply says nothing, then theoretically, I guess they are his, but he doesn't use it. So what happens to them, I have no idea. But he never has to take them if he doesn't want to take them. But again, then they're not hers. When he stipulates, then they belong to her. Fundamentally, in Nichsei Malug, that was my point in the first Mishnah. In Nichsei Malug, which is the default position, in Nichsei Malug, the land is hers. It belongs to her. The fact that she can't sell it, actually, is a kind of chidush. The fact that he has his rights, actually, contradict her basic right. But at the end of the day, let's say if they get divorced, it's her land. If the land is worth a lot more, she profits. If the land is worth less, she loses, but it's her land. So the case over here is an actually legal stipulation. But no, he's not forced to take payroll. If he doesn't want to take it, he forgoes it. He just doesn't take it. So
legally, if it's Nichsei Malug, can she sell it with the proviso that he can continue to get the payrolls?
No, he can't. She can't. No, she can't sell it. According to the Mishnah, the sale is invalid, actually. That's the point. That the kinyan payroll of the husband is such that it actually precludes the sale. Now, what's very interesting about that, by the way, is that the same parallel situation, let's say it's not man and wife, it's two partners. One person owns the property, and the other person has the right to the produce. The question is, that case, which comes up, I said, in Gitin, is interesting. There's a dispute in that case about whether the one who has the payroll, how much rights he has in terms of the property. Do we consider the one who has produce, since he gets all the produce, in a certain sense, legally, he has certain privileges even within the property itself. The privileges, the property in regard to the produce. The question that comes up, where the commentaries talk about, is, does this actually, is Nisei Maluk the same? For example, there is a position that says that even though normally the one who has the produce is considered a real owner of the property, with all kinds of other interesting, consequences, but marriage is different, because fundamentally in marriage, it's really hers. It's hers. And his rights to the produce are actually not as powerful as they would be in a normal partnership. But my point is, the point I wanted to emphasize over here in terms of the Mishnah, at least I'm suggesting a reading of the Mishnah, that this whole question, in other words, the Mishnah, I think, does see a problem of sorts, or a tension, I would put it, between these two aspects of marriage. On one hand, it's a very deeply personal connection. They come together, they're going to live together, maybe they have children, have a family, etc., etc. And each one in the Mishnah, of course, this is an ancient document, but the Mishnah understands that each one has a certain responsibility. Then there's the financial side, and I think what the Mishnah understands is all these financial arrangements, you can talk what you want, but at the end of the day, it's a couple working in life together. And the financial piece of it can actually sometimes be in conflict with the personal, which is why I think the Mishnah emphasizes here, the man can in fact, whether it's encouraged or not, I don't know, but it is striking that you have a Mishnah, a long one too, which talks about somebody foregoing rights. That's the only point I wanted to make about this Mishnah. I just to point out, by the way, the degree to point out where the tension lies. Okay, let me point us to another Mishnah, and then I'll stop with that. And please ask more questions if you have them, or insights or comments. But I just wanted to direct us to another Mishnah over here, which is rather striking, and that's chapter 9, Mishnah 4. Chapter 9, Mishnah 4 is quite remarkable Mishnah, and it's something to think about. The Mishnah says the following: Hamoshni vet ishto chenvanit o shamina apitrapa. The Mishnah has the following case: if a man, a husband, he sets his wife up as a chenvanit. Literally means a storekeeper. In other words, they have a business. He has a store. He has a grocery store. And he says to his wife, you run the store. You run the grocery store. Or he appoints her as a steward, as an apitrapa. Apitrapa is a term that appears in many places in the Talmud. It's somebody who is in charge of something. Often it's in the Mishnah and the Gemara. It could be someone in charge. Let's say there's a minor child, or someone who not capable of taking care of his or her own affairs. Then the family or the court can appoint what's called a kind of an apotropos. An apotropos is here they translate as steward, someone who handles the property. Let's say it's a little child. So there's an apotropos, and then typically, so here the Mishnah says, well, let's forget the Mishnah. In general, the rule of the apotropos generally, and there are two kinds of apotropos. One could be the family appoints. Let's say you have a minor child. The husband died, let's say. The father died. Now you have the child, and the wife is not doesn't know the financial side or whatever. So either the family or the court can appoint somebody to care for the child. Right? That's called an apotropos. And typically, the apotropos has to be held accountable. Is this guy managing the affairs of the family, all the finances? So there's a rule that the apotropos, that the family or the court can require this steward, this apotropos, to swear, to take a shvua, to take the oath that he hasn't stolen anything. He has to give an accounting. And not just an accounting, they can administer an oath. The oath is very critical in terms of the presumption of the Mishnah and Gemara is that people take oaths very seriously. So we can impose an oath upon an apotropos. This is a kind of rabbinic oath. This chapter 9, deals a lot with oaths. So there are oaths that are required from the Torah. There are 3 kinds of oaths. I hope we get to that. And then there's a rabbinic oath. So a normal apotropos, the family or the court can force the apotropos to swear and to justify the accounting. The Mishnah that we have over here is, what about if a husband says to his wife, I want you to be an apotropos. I have a lot of property. You're the person, you're going to oversee the property. Or we have a store, the grocery store. He says to his wife, Sarna, you run the grocery store. The Mishnah says, she's the apotropos. Says the Mishnah, Hareze mashpia kozban sheyirtze. Under these circumstances, he can force her to swear. He can take it to court and say, listen, I want to figure the grocery store, the finances. I want to understand the money, the money flowing in, the money flowing out. And he takes his wife to court, and he makes her swear. If she's a storekeeper, I want to see the books. Are these numbers, are they true? Swear to me. Says the Mishnah, he can do that. Because she's according to the Mishnah, she's any worker, any apotropos, right? So hareze mashpia, that's the Mishnah. That's not so shocking, I would say, because it's set up as a business arrangement. Again, you don't trust her, okay, whatever. But Rabbi Eliezer Omer, afilu al pilcha v'al isata. And Rabbi Eliezer goes beyond. Rabbi Eliezer says that a husband can call his wife to court, even in regard to spindle and dough. Spindle means wool. Let's say the wife knits. The wife buys wool and makes sweaters for the family, for him. He's wearing the sweater that his wife made for him. According to Rabbi Eliezer, he has the right to take her to court and to force her to swear to give an accounting about the dough and about the wool. In other words, you're going home, you have a big Shabbos, you're there, it's a nice meal, that chicken is delicious, pass the cholent. Oh, by the way, dear, we're going to court tomorrow. I want to make sure this cholent exactly, seems like very expensive. Or how much money did you spend on this? Shouldn't be that much money. What happened? Really? Is that what it cost? We'll see you in court tomorrow. According to Rabbi Eliezer, the husband has the right to do that. Now, I think we could all imagine this would not do well for the relationship, at least not the way we. That's what Rabbi Eliezer says. The Chachamim disagree, and we follow Rabbi Eliezer. Typically, is not the opinion we follow. I did want to point out that in terms of thinking of this tension between the personal side of marriage and the financial side, can you imagine, according to Rabbi Eliezer, every week the husband can just take it to court and is permitted to impose an oath. She has to swear that that the children's really cost X amount of dollars, and she's not pocketing the extra couple of dollars, So again, you have to wonder about this, but this is, I think, a very good Mishnah, which really puts forward this potential tension that it says, what the rabbis disagree. If she's set up as a normal businesswoman, that's the rules of business. That's one thing. But it comes to the person, the way they live their life on a daily basis. She's sewing, she's cooking. We can't take it to court and demand an accounting on how much wool she bought this week when she made him 2 sweaters. That she can't do. So that's an interesting Mishnah over here. And I think it's actually very striking. Just wanted to point that out. Okay, before I continue here, is there anybody have any comments or questions? If not, we will continue. Okay. Now let me just jump ahead to one Mishnah here. I'll jump ahead to the Mishnah, chapter 9, Mishnah number 7. Chapter 9, Mishnah 7. So Mishnah 7 says the following. Hapogemet ketuvata loti para ela b'shvua. This is a different case. This is a situation where the marriage, let's say, ends in divorce. Fine. So we know that if this is called Masechet Ketubot, the woman is entitled to a ketubah. Let's call it 200 zuz. Okay? It can be more than 200 because the husband in chapter 5 can give any number. He can't give less than 200. He can commit to 1,000. This has cases of 1,000 zuz. But anyway, whatever it is. But she is pogemet. She comes to collect the ketubah, and she is pogemet the ketubah. Somehow it means here they translate vitiates or limits. Pagam is something you have made it, you have weakened it. She weakened her ketubah. We'll explain in a minute. In such a case, she can collect the remainder of the ketubah, but she has to take an oath. She takes the shvua. I'll talk about that in a minute. Now the Mishnah has a second case. Eid echan me'idah shehi perua. What about the following case? Woman's divorced. She goes to collect her 200 zuz, and one witness comes forward and says she already collected the ketubah. The husband paid her the money earlier. The concern is that she already received part of the payment. In the first case, she acknowledges that. Yes, I did get part of the payment. That's pogemet. In the second case, she denies it. When one witness says that she was paid, that's the same. In that case, she has to take an oath. And the third case of the Mishnah is minichse yetomim uminachasim mishubadin mishelo befanav lo tipara ela b'shvua. The Mishnah has 5 cases. The last 3 of them are different kinds of cases. In a case where he died, and now she wants to collect the ketubah from the orphans, or he sold property. He sold property, and she wants to collect the ketubah from the property that was sold. So there's a lien on that property, but she wants to collect that property, or he's alive, but the guy skipped town, and he disappeared. Who knows where he is? She wants to collect the ketubah from his property. She goes to court. He's not around. In all of these 5 cases, she may collect the ketubah, but only if she swears. Sure. So let me just say that the next Mishnah explains each case. So we'll suffice with Mishnah number 7. Let me say something about taking oaths. The taking oaths, there's a whole tractate about shvuot. And this chapter of Ketubot, by the way, which is chapter 9, which is a very rich chapter, the Talmud, the Gemara, speaks about all kinds of claims and counterclaims. Shvua is a way to find out the truth. The assumption is that people will not take false oaths, because an oath involves the mentioning of God's name. It will be a desecration of God's name to swear falsely. So the presumption of the Mishnah is that people will never do that. The Talmud itself has a comment that may have been true in times of the Mishnah, but the Gemara, which comes later, says in our time, people unfortunately are willing to swear falsely. So there's all kinds of other, we try to deal with that. In any event, the case of the Mishnah, the first 2 cases are very interesting, because how many cases do we have where there's an obligation, what they call Torah obligation, a doraita, to take an oath? So there are 3 cases where the Torah, according to the understanding of the Talmud, where the Torah imposes an oath. 3 such cases. One case is what's called modeh b'miktzat. Let's say you say to me, you owe me $100. you owe me $100. I say to you, I don't owe you $100. I owe you only $50. I do owe you money. I borrowed money, but it wasn't 100, or it was 100, but I paid back 50, or it was only 50 to begin with. That's called the modeh b'miktzat. I admit a partial admission. So in that case, the Gemara says that I pay 50 because I do admit to 50. So I pay the 50, and the other 50 I have to swear that I don't. I have to swear that I paid it. And if I take the oath, I don't have to pay. That says the Gemara, long sugi in Bava Metzia, that's a shvua doraita. They derive it from a pasuk in Parshat Mishpatim, but that's shvua doraita. That's one case. The second case, where the oath is a biblical responsibility, is a case where you say to me, I owe you $100. I say, I owe you nothing. But one witness comes and says, you owe $100. Not two witnesses. If two witnesses come, I just pay. But there's one witness, only one. So one witness in monetary affairs can't force me to pay, but it can force me to swear. That's called the shvua of an eid echad. That's the second case where the Gemara speaks of an obligation to swear from the Torah obligation, a Torah shvua. And the third case, which is explicit in the Torah actually, is if you gave me an object to watch. And if you gave me an object to watch, then and you come to me and where's my object? I say the object was stolen. Let's say I'm watching for free. I'm watching for I'm not getting paid to watch. So if I say I'm only responsible for negligence, but not for theft, and I say the object was stolen, you have the right to bring me to the court and to force me to swear that it was stolen. It's called shvuat hashomrim, the oath of the guardian, of the watcher. Those are the three oaths that are Torah responsibilities. There are many other oaths found in the Talmud in Tractate Shavuot, which talks about oaths. The three oaths that we're talking about that are from the Torah are oaths where the person who takes the oath swears and is exempt from payment. Now, what's interesting about this Mishnah, Pogeme Ketubot, is that the first two cases involve, in the first instance, a partial confession. Pogeme Ketubot, the man, she says, give me my ketubah. Ex-husband, give me my ketubah. And he says, I paid you already. She said, you paid me 50. I'm entitled to 200. So she's admitting to 50. She admits that she received part, but she wants the rest of it. In that case, the Mishnah says he says you have to swear. That's one case. The second case is where she says, I want my 200 zuz. He says, I paid you. She says, you didn't pay me. But one witness says that she was paid. In that case, she has to swear. Now, these two cases are similar, actually, to the classical cases of shvua, which is modeh b'miktzat, where you admit to part, or one witness comes and says you're obligated. But we shouldn't get confused over here, because the shvua in these mishnayot over here are not the Torah oaths. These are rabbinic impositions. They're rabbinic oaths, because it's not the same as the case I described. Because the case over here, the normal case of let's say modeh b'miktzat is you say I owe you. You say I owe you $100, and I say I only owe you 50. I admit to 50. I deny the other 50. In that case, I have to swear that I paid the 50, and I only owe you 50. And if I swear that, I'm exempted from paying the other 50. It's called nishba v'niftar. But the case of the Mishnah is not that case, because in the case of the Mishnah it's not the borrower, actually. She's not the borrower in the case. She's more like the lender. She has a ketubah. You owe me money. Give me the money you owe me. He's the guy who owes the money. She's the person who demands the money. So it's not the normal case of modeh b'miktzat. And the same thing in the second instance of the one witness. The one witness normally goes to the person who to the lover, to the borrower, and says, you borrowed $200 or whatever it was from the other guy. I deny it. I have to swear. And when I swear and I'm exempt from payment. The Torah oaths are always about swearing and exempting. But over here, it's not the case. She actually has a ketubah. What is the ketubah? The ketubah is testimony. This document is signed by witnesses or given before witnesses. So I have witnesses. She has the witness that he owes her. So the oath we impose upon her is not the oath that's imposed in the classical case of one witness, in which the one from whom the money is demanded swears and is exempted. But the Mishnah over here has a very particular oath in this case. It's a special oath that the woman has to swear in order to collect the remainder of the ketubah. It's not the same. Now the point is that when you look at the mishnayot in this chapter, they deal a lot with situations where you have to take an oath. So, for example, I'll give you another example of it. There's a principle in the Mishnah that if you want to collect from not from the person himself, let's say, but from his children, from his inheritors, a nifra mi nichse yatomim ela b'shvua. And this is very relevant to the ketubah. What this mishnayot in this chapter deal with, I wish we had a lot more time. What the mishnayot deal with are situations where the woman wants to remember the ketubah. The woman collects in two different situations. One is in the event of divorce, but the other is in the event of death. Now, in the event of death, she is going to try to collect the ketubah, not from the husband, he's not around anymore, but from the husband's children. They are what's called yatomim. They're orphans. Orphans doesn't mean that there's 4-year-old orphans. It means that it's not the person himself, it's his inheritors. When you want to collect from the inheritors, in general, the principle is you can only collect when you take an oath. So the oaths factor in this chapter in a very profound way. And the point is that these are all situations where the woman to collect the tuva, she has to take a shvuah. These shavuot, which are run through the whole chapter, these are rabbinic obligations. These are rabbinic oaths. So this is what the mishnayot are about here. Are about she wants to collect the money. She is owed the money, and she has a ketubah. She has the document. The ketubah document is basically a shtar. But what is a ketubah? A ketubah is a shtar. It's a document. A document is fundamentally witnesses, not who testify orally, but who write down their names. It's as if they testify orally. So she has witnesses. Nonetheless, the rabbis have imposed upon the woman, if she's collecting from the Yarshim, from the inheritors, from the Yatomim, then she has to swear. Let me make one other point about this Mishnayot, which is very important to know. In this Mishnayot, which talk about, let's find one other Mishnah. There's so much here to say, actually. Let me just make one other point first, and I'll get back to this. We have just a few minutes, but let me make one other point about chapter 9, Mishnah number 5. Chapter 9, Mishnah 5. Mishnah 4 was the question: can he impose an oath upon his wife to prove how much food she bought to make the meals? That was so. The rabbis say no. He's not allowed to do that. That he can't do. That would create too much tension, presumably. But Mishnah number 5, which plays into what we started with this evening, Katavua, again, a long Mishnah. Katavua, neder ushvua enli olayach, enu yachol lashbia. What if the man wrote, he writes to his wife, I forgo my right to administer oaths. Okay? In other words, once again, the Mishnah is a long Mishnah about the man who forgoes his rights. The previous Mishnah said he has the right to impose an oath if he's in charge of the store, if she's in charge of the property, she's a steward. But what about if he writes, I forgo this right? Then we have a long Mishnah which talks about his ability to forgo the right to force her to swear. Now, the Mishnah has different kinds of cases. In other words, let's say a situation where the wife dies. First he died, so he's obligated to pay the ketubah, and then the wife dies. So now her inheritors want to collect the ketubah. So if he only exempted her from an oath, then when her children want to collect, her inheritors want to collect, they do have to swear. And the Mishnah goes like the previous Mishnah that we saw, goes through all these different cases where he actually explicitly forgoes his right to force her to swear, his right to force her inheritors to swear, or others who come through her to swear, etc., etc. That's what the Mishnah is talking about. So he can forgo the right to take the oath. He can do that. He can forgo the right to take the oath. Now, the Mishnah then goes on to other cases about what about if he dies? What about his inheritors, who now the demand is made upon them? What about does he forgo their rights as well? Or they say, listen, the deal you have with our father was one thing, but we're different. We want to force you to swear. Right. So the point is that the Mishnah, actually, these mishnayot are all about imposing an oath. And what comes up in the Mishnah, I'll just finish with these two thoughts. What comes up in the Mishnah is the following. We have a principle. I mentioned this earlier. When it comes to oaths, that if you want to collect not from the person himself, but from his children, and you can only collect from Yatomim with an oath. You have to always swear to collect money from the Yatomim. Now, the point is that's one principle. Then there's another principle that's found in these mishnayot, which is a very important principle. When you want to collect the ketubah, the woman wants to collect the ketubah. Husband dies. Woman wants the ketubah. The ketubah you can only collect from real property, from land, but not real property, which is called in the Mishnah metaltalin, movable objects. Metaltali diyatmi lo mishtabdi. This is a very important point. We should know this, that when you collect a ketubah, maybe you discussed this already I'm just filling in this 1 week, but the obligation to pay the ketubah falls upon the real property of the husband. But metaltalin, movable objects, they are not mishubadim. Metaltali diyatmi lo mishtabdi. So all the discussion in the Mishnah, when the woman wants to collect, is to collect from real property. That's why the Mishnah talks about, for example, in other Mishnayot, about setting aside specific property from which to collect, because the woman might be concerned the guy has no property. Okay, maybe a house is considered real property, but the point is, so normally you can only collect from the yatomim. In the case of divorce, it's not an issue because the husband's around. But in the case of death, you only can collect from the inheritors, from the yatomim, from real property. Metaltali diyatmi or mishtabdi. I just wanted to make one point you should know, that is the principle in the Mishnah. But there was a takana. There was a special decree made by the Gaonim hundreds of years after the Gemara, that when it comes to ketubah, metaltalin are in fact mishtabdi. The woman can collect her ketubah even from movable property. So these mishnayot in this chapter presume that that's not the case. But the later takana, hundreds of years later, the Gaonim, living from say the year 800 to 1100 or 800 to 1000, the time of the Gaonim, maybe even a bit earlier than that, they made this special decree that the ketubah may be collected from movable property. I just wanted to point out, just in conclusion, we're learning the Mishnah over here, but when it comes to these matters, especially marriage, divorce, and the whole financial side, there are various takanot over time that actually loosened a lot of these rules. I mean, the takana we're most familiar with is takana Rabbanit Gershom, about a man marrying more than one woman at a time. You can only have one wife. That's a later takana. That's not found in the Mishnah. Those who study Tractate Yevamot know it talks about a man married to many wives. The mishnayot and Yevamot, that's how it starts. A man has two wives. So Yibam under those circumstances. So we have to understand that when you're studying these matters, the Mishnah is really the beginning of our learning. And you want to understand how this really in real life played out, you have to look at the Mishnah, the Gemara, the commentaries, etc. But the Mishnah is very significant because it's really an introduction to Torah Shabbat Paths. Anyway, just to summarize what we have over here, the main point I wanted to make, looking at some of these mishnayot, is there is a whole financial side, the whole discussion of oaths. This is really when you have, this is real Choshen Mishpat. This is the heart of Choshen Mishpat. Claim and counterclaim. And how do you figure out, how do you get to the truth? The oath is there to get to the truth in situations where it's very unclear. Like in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says she has a ketubot, she has a document, kosher document. He has a witness that says she was paid. So then you have an oath. The oath is there to try to clear it up, to adjudicate it. And the other point I wanted to make, which is true both in chapter 8 and 9, the two long mishnayot that talk about forgoing rights. And that the forgoing of rights, I think, is there because the Mishnah understands very well that it's all this financial stuff in the whole tractate, but it often can appear to be in conflict with the personal relationship. The extreme example is Rabbi Eliezer in the Mishnah. He says he can force her to swear about how much food she bought at the supermarket this week. You can imagine every week she's going to court to swear about the supermarket. Did she skim $2.20 off the bill? You know what I mean? We can understand that might be problematic for the relationship. Because the Chachamim disagree. That you can't do. If she's running the business is one thing. In any event, I wanted to point out some of maybe the underlying tensions that emerged from the study of the Mishnah. Anyway, next week, hopefully, Rabbanit Leah will be back. But anyway, it's just filling in for 1 week. So
Thank you so much.
I'd like to ask
Thank
you,
you.
if I may.
Oh.
I have a question that I'd like to
Yes.
ask, if I may. And
Yes.
that is, since the Shavuah is a Shavuah Doraita, how come that there is an opinion that the Ketubah is not itself not Midoraita, but Midorabanan?
No, the Shvuah in the Mishnah is not the right. My point was that the Shvuah in the Mishnah is similar to a Shvuah Doraita, but it's not a Shvuah Doraita. These are all rabbinic oaths. Because remember, the Shvuah Doraita is every Shvuah Doraita is with the person who owes the money, swears and doesn't have to pay. But the case in the Mishnah is the opposite. He owes the money. The ketubah is she has the proof he owes the money.
Okay.
One witness should not be taken seriously because it's one witness against two. He has two witnesses. The ketubah is like two witnesses. Nonetheless, the Mishnah imposes the oath. The Gemara says because when she says she says he said I paid you the whole thing. She says you only paid me partial. So the Gemara says people who pay money out typically know very well how much they paid out. People who receive the money often don't pay that much attention to it. You got to check in the mail. It was for $200. Really, I thought it was for $100. So in that case, she has to swear. But this is not a Shvuah Doraita because she actually wins because the ketubah is a winning document. The ketubah is witnesses. Two witnesses are the highest form of proof. So she should actually win. Nonetheless, the Mishnah imposes the oath. Nonetheless, despite this fact, it's part and parcel of the same larger issue, which is, on one hand, there has to be a financial arrangement. On the other hand, marriage should not be about just finances. So I think that's what the Mishnah is wrestling with throughout. But no, she actually, the ketubah is a winner. She has a winning document, 100%. Now, in the case where she herself says, you only owe me 50, for example. So in that case, that's not a Shvuah Doraita either, because in the Shvuah Doraita is, the guy who owes the money says, I paid you back 50. So that person swears on the other 50 and doesn't pay. In this case, she swears and she collects. So it's not the same thing. I'll stop at this point. And all right, so good evening. And again, it was nice to be able to participate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Silver, for filling in for Rabbanit Leah and for that amazing class. Thank you to all our students for your participation. Just quickly before we go, a reminder that you can register for even more amazing classes at Drisha this spring Zman at 5784.drisha.org/spring. The classes that have already started will be continuing, but there's new classes still starting, including on Sunday morning at 9 a.m. The Man of Faith in the Age of AI with Rabbi Levi Morrow, and at 10 a.m. with Rabbi Silver's continuing Tanakh class, and the Book of Exodus, Reclaiming the Past and Building for the Future. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.